I was an atheist. I was an orphan to suicide. I was a meth head prostitute strung out on heroin. I was a liar, a manipulator, a thief. I was all of the things that you would think would condemn you to the exact opposite of what I was experiencing. And I was instantaneously healed out of day 3 of withdrawal. It was incredible. I threw myself on the ground. I was crying out to the divine. How could this be happening? I don't believe in you. I don't believe in this. You could not have picked a more unworthy subject to bestow this kind of grace on.
Betty Guadagno, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
So grateful to be here. Thank you for this conscious space.
Before you talk about your near-death-like experience, could you talk about what your life was like before?
Yeah, trigger warning. My life is quite traumatizing. I do have a lot of very deep, dark contrast. My life before my spiritual experience, I was a staunch atheist, militant atheist. I had long philosophical rants about how there was nothing more. I was also an orphan to suicide. My parents both completed suicide in 2007 due to their drug addiction. I was also a drug addict before my experience. I was very impoverished. I was homeless. I was a prostitute. My life was full of very contrasted experiences. And then in my spiritual experience, I saw all this light and love and just unconditional love that I had never experienced at all in my human experience. So the contrast was really, really dense.
Okay. And could you describe what happened in your spiritual experience?
Yeah, I had a spiritual experience as a result of a drug overdose. Go figure. I did too many drugs. I had been on illicit substances and just racked in my own addiction for over 2 decades. I was on substances for 22 years. And this particular day, which was March 23rd of 2019, which is actually the beginning of the season of Aries, which is the symbol of rebirth. So I know that there's some sort of symbolism there. But my awakening experience happened that day, and I had just taken too much. And I had a really long sort of drug-a-log. Every day I was doing at least 5 or 6 different substances, and I was doing a lot of them. I just really didn't want to feel. My life was full of so many dense experiences that at that point in my life, my addiction had taken over in such a huge, profound way. And so I had this overdose, and the first part of my experience felt a lot like a life review, but I wasn't just experiencing my personal life review. I was also experiencing a life review for the whole collective. It felt like the whole world, because I was experiencing feelings and emotions that I had never experienced in my life. And so today I have some language for it. And what happened to me was I experienced a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. Don't know what Kundalini means? Neither did I. So it roughly translates into life force. So I had a life force energy activation awakening where all of my energy centers, my chakra systems, all became online and awoken all at the exact same moment. So I had this rush of energy going up and down my spine. And as my third eye and my crown opened, I felt my awareness leave my body. And I had this very intense awakening experience. So in my life review, I told you about some of the trauma in my life or some of my experience in my life, but I wasn't just a person who experienced trauma. I was a traumatized person who was purposefully, maliciously traumatizing other people. So I started to experience all the pain that I had inflicted on others. And that felt like some sort of personal hell to actually experience all the harm that I had caused. And then, like I said, I was experiencing things that didn't happen to me in my life. Like I was experiencing the loss of a child. I felt my child die, but I don't have a child. And it felt like I was in my aunt's awareness, and her daughter had died. My cousin had died 20 years before this experience. And it just felt like I was experiencing everything for the whole world. It was like the movie The Giver. Like I was downloaded with every single emotion, every single experience that's ever happened on earth, ever, all at the exact same moment. And then I felt like I was drowning in an ocean of anguish, because those were the emotions that were really sticking out, was the suffering, the sadness, the grief, the loneliness, the despair. And I felt so stuck, and it felt like what I imagine people to describe hell to feel like. And then I started to hear these masculine voices. And the first masculine voice was my divine masculine energy, my counterpart. And then it morphed into every male voice that I've ever known that's crossed over. So my father was there, and he just kept affirming over and over again, you are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe. And I followed his voice, obviously, because it was a familiar voice. And I found myself traveling into the light. So I started to leave those feelings of despair and anguish. And I started to travel up the scale of consciousness, you could say, into states of courage, acceptance, light, love, peace, serenity. And that's where I stayed for the rest of my experience. So the way that I would describe it was that I made it to heaven. This crazy drug addict prostitute atheist made it to heaven, and that really upsets so many people, that an atheist could make it to heaven. But there's no such thing as condemnation. Only I am condemning myself in my human experience. And for me, being a staunch atheist served its purpose for that part in my life. And I'm not trying to convert anybody or tell anybody that they're wrong in their path. Everyone's path is designed that way for a reason. So I was pretty pissed when I landed in heaven and I realized that I was wrong. My first sort of thought that came into my head was, what? I'm wrong? This is crazy. I can't even believe that this is happening. And I just thought that the whole experience was just some sort of drug-induced hallucination, psychosis, something like that. Because I didn't believe in this, so I didn't believe that anything was really happening. But I just went with it. And then I started to get downloaded with the awareness of the Great Awakening, that I'm a divine spiritual soldier sent here on a mission to uplift the consciousness of the planet, and I've come here with thousands of other souls that were on my specific jump team. So I was part of this spiritual army, for lack of a better word. It's not like we're not fighting any kind of war or anything. We just came here to liberate consciousness. We came here to uplift the consciousness of the planet. And I don't know if Earth actually wants liberation, but I'm here for it. And then I was also taken through the details of my pre-birth plan. That was the reason why I was there. Should I go into that?
What was your
I'll go into
plan?
it. Sometimes I can just talk without stopping, so please feel free to just cut me off. So I was shown a table of beings, and they didn't tell me who they were, but they were definitely in charge. I didn't even have to ask. I knew that I was standing in front of whoever was in charge there, in charge of me anyway. And they had this big giant book, and they were thumbing through it, and they said to me, it's good to see you. You're not meant to stay. You're only here for information. And I was looking all around me. I'm like, you guys aren't talking to me, are you? Because I don't know where I am, but it feels way better than where I just was. And there's no way that I'm going back to where I just was. And they just kept affirming, no, you're only here for information. Get ready to go back. And they took me through this giant grocery store. That's what it looked like in my mind's eye. And I had this big empty grocery cart. And lining the walls of the grocery store aisles were these giant cereal boxes. And every cereal box had a life experience on it. And so I start grabbing everything because I know that I'm going to Earth to uplift the consciousness of the planet. And I don't realize maybe exactly what that means, even though I've been to Earth thousands of other times before. But I knew that I had to pick a lot of deep, dark, contrasted experiences so that I could transmute that energy for the whole collective. So the one memory that really sticks out for me is that I chose this cereal box of childhood sexual trauma. And of course, a human would be like, why? How could that evolve you as a soul or uplift the consciousness of the planet? I don't have a great answer for it, but today I have unwavering faith. I don't need to know the answer. I just need to trust that my higher self, my soul and source has got me. I don't need to worry about anything else. So I picked this experience, and as I picked the box, a little orb of light came out with the box. And that orb of light was the soul of the man who would molest me as a small child. And we came into contract with each other, orb to orb, and we made this agreement. And I saw the reasons why. And I saw that in a previous lifetime, I had been his abuser in the same capacity. And so in this lifetime, we were balancing the energy. And in this moment of being in this awareness, it felt like 2 tons of bondage had been released from my spirit. I was no longer a victim of my circumstance. I was actually a divine co-creator of my experience. Things had no longer happened to me, they happened for me, because on some soul level, I had chosen it for the evolvement of myself. And so having this awareness, I find my senses back in front of the table of beings, and I'm so grateful. I'm basically crying out in gratitude on my knees. Oh my goodness, now it all makes sense. Thank you so much for showing me this. I'm still not going back to Earth, but I'm so happy to have this information. This is so cool. I'm going to grab my PJs and a bowl of popcorn. I'll watch the show from up here. I think it's going to be a really cool movie. And they were like, no, we're not sending you back as a punishment. You know, you signed up for something and you have to complete it. That's just the way that it is. And I said, well, I can't go back into that body that I just came from, because she has abused herself so much over these years, and there's no way to heal her. There's no way to fix her. I can't go back. And they said, okay, well, if you won't go back into her, then we'll show you the baby that you'll be born into. And they showed me this baby, and everything looks a lot like a video game. And that could be because of the generation that I'm born in, or because we're living in a simulation, or maybe a combination of both. You can take your pick. So when they showed me this baby, it looked like a video game character, like this little avatar kind of spinning slowly, and then all of her stats next to her. It talked about her charisma level, her personality, her trauma, her adversity, what she'd have to overcome, parts of her purpose. And you know, this baby was going to be taking on my life experience grocery cart because I hadn't finished it. So she was going to have to experience all the same things that I had already experienced. Plus, she had even deeper levels of societal adversity because of the family that she was going to be born into. And I thought, man, if these are really my only options, going back into that glitched, broken body that I just came from, or starting over from zero, then I guess I'll just go back into her. And I found myself sifting back into my awareness. And as I was kind of coming back down into my body, the beings of light, they said, listen, the first part of your life was boot camp. And the second part of your life will be carrying out your mission. It's not going to be nearly as challenging. You've already gone through all of the hard stuff. They said you're going to have mentors and teachers and soulmates and kindred spirits and community. And your life is going to be so different. Just trust us. And I was like, I do not trust you guys, whatever. And I found myself back in my body. I'll pause there.
Okay. Yeah, well, this is incredible to hear about. And you talk about a pre-birth planning. So, and then you talk about also that you made a soul contract with the person that sexually abused you. Is that saying that everyone who goes through sexual abuse in this life was all of their sexual abuse from soul contracts as well? Or where does free will come into play?
Yeah, I do believe that the traumas that we experience are pre-planned. Now, obviously, this is not something that you throw at somebody who's in the midst of getting over a trauma. You know, like I don't go up to parents who have lost a child and been like, well, you planned it before you got here, so get over it. That's not what the information around pre-birth planning is for. The information around pre-birth planning is to give a person a sense of autonomy and to know that the experiences that I'm having, whether my human, perceives them as good or bad, they're not some sort of punishment from some, damning God. They're actually something that I, as a soul, I designed. And this information, it doesn't resonate for everybody, and that's okay. It doesn't have to. If you would have told me 10 years ago that I picked my parents, that we picked this, challenging life, that they had this very high probability of committing suicide together, I'd be like, dude, you're crazy. This sounds nuts. There's no way that I would pick any of this because my human can't comprehend. But my soul does know, and I just have to trust that aspect of myself. I just have to trust that this is all happening for a reason. For me, it makes my human experience much greater to know that I'm not condemned or that I'm not being punished. So Yeah, the information around pre-birth planning, I believe, I mean, I have a deep knowing, but other people can adopt it as a belief that everything that happens, war, pain, genocide, people being murderers, rapists, all of these things, they are pre-designed. Where does free will come in? Well, okay, so let's say that you pick the life experience of childhood sexual trauma, and you come into contract with one soul or multiple souls. You have the opportunity to transcend that. Let's say that you're the sexual abuser. You have the opportunity, however it plays out, like whether you have an epiphany, a spiritual awakening, and you decide, oh my God, I've done all this harm to people. How can I do better? How can I make a living amends? And maybe you make amends to the actual person that you harmed. You come clean. You say like, hey, I'm sorry that I did this to you. And I'm a different person now. Or maybe you don't do anything. Maybe you just live your life silently and decide to be a better person and you don't cause harm anymore. That could be another way to take care of it as well. But I do think that things are pre-planned. I don't think that this information is for somebody in the midst of a trauma. If somebody was to get raped, like there shouldn't be some spiritual experiencer walking in being like, hey, so I'm here to just let you know that everything happens for a reason and you're divinely guided. This is information that's for people that are into their healing journey, people who are open to this information. It doesn't resonate for everybody, and that's okay.
All of this, the wars that are happening today, literally at this very moment, do you think they're contributing to this great awakening that you talked about?
Absolutely. These are alarm clocks. These are huge alarm clocks for us to come into a state of awareness. And whatever that means for each individual person. For me, when I hear about war or whatever's going on in the world, which, I don't watch the news because I don't have any business watching the news. So I study and I teach A Course in Miracles, which is a metaphysical text, and it's a channeled message from Jesus. And in A Course in Miracles, Jesus says that we live inside of a dream, that this is an illusion. So the same way that when I go to sleep at night and I have a sleeping dream, I can only see my little dream. I can't see what's going on in the whole outer universe of the dream. I'm sure that there is an outer universe of the dream, but I don't know what's going on inside of it. So I do the same thing in my waking dream. I stay in my lane. I do things that raise my frequency. I'm of service. I help others. I live in New York City, so I see a lot of pain and suffering just by walking down the street. You can see people who are very wealthy and people who are eating out of garbage cans all in one block. So I think that, for me, these are all alarm clocks. Like, hey, of course this world is fake. Look at how crazy it is out here. It's nuts. And I don't have to focus on the craziness. I can just focus on my personal soul mission. I think of the world like a video game, and it's a matrix. And the big boss, the bad guy in the video game, is actually the game itself. So all of these layers of distraction are to keep us from fulfilling our soul's mission. And generally our soul's mission is just to be of service to others, to be kind, to be considerate. And that can happen in so many different ways. Smiling at a stranger on the street, holding a door open, doing something really big like creating laws and enacting real change in the world. So the big boss of the video game, the matrix that we live inside of, it just wants to distract us and separate us from each other. It doesn't want us to understand the law of oneness, that we truly are all connected. And everything that you see happening in the world is a reflection of your inner world. I'll leave it there.
And so if we heal our inner world, then we could help to heal the outer world, because we are creating our actual reality.
Absolutely, absolutely. The more that you heal your inner world, the more that the outer world starts to fade away. Like, okay, for instance, I don't watch the news. I know that there is a war going on. I don't know a lot about it because this is my conscious choice to not pay attention to those things, because I can't help the world heal if I'm looking at the trauma. So instead I focus on the healing. Again, I'm not dismissing the fact that things are going on, but this is my process. So the more that I heal my inner world, the less that the more forgiveness I have in my heart. So, like I'm sure in this war, there's a good guy and a bad guy. I don't know who they are or what it is, but the thing is that nobody's offering forgiveness to the bad guy because, of course, they've condemned them. Like, they're the bad guy. So the thing about living your life by spiritual principles is to live them by honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, acceptance, forgiveness, unconditional love. So I just focus on the person's core, and at everyone's core, they are nothing but divine light. And despite whatever circumstances or part they're playing in the illusion, I choose to see everybody as that spark of divine light. And I'm not saying I do it all the time, okay? Like, there are things that I feel grave injustice about. I work in the healthcare industry. Every day that I go to work, I'm like, why? Why does this exist? Why is the world this way? And I do feel a great sense of injustice, and I have to center myself back to that thought that everything is working in divine right order. I don't have access to the big picture, but I trust that my higher self does. And so I just have to keep steadfast in my spiritual discipline of seeing every person as a being of light.
And back to your spontaneous Kundalini awakening. After that experience, you said that you were a prostitute and you were a drug addict. So what did your life look like after? Was it the next day you were completely changed, or was it a slow process? What was that like?
Yeah, I was definitely not changed the next day. Although I had a lot of weird conscious thoughts the next day. The first person that I told about my experience was Instagram. I went on Instagram Live and I was like, guys, I died. I'm dead. This is crazy. I can't believe that you guys can see me. My life became super chaotic and erratic after my experience. It wasn't just like it wasn't like a light switch because I was just so unaware. So it took me about 2.5 months to actually realize that my experience was a true one. And it took all of these signs and synchronicities, and I experienced a spontaneous healing. So after my experience, I would call up my drug dealers like I regularly did because I was a drug addict. And I'd say, hey man, come by, I need to pick up. And the guy would be like, no man, I'm out. You need to stop doing what you're doing. I don't sell drugs anymore. Don't call me, lose my number. I'm like, okay, that's weird. Click. I'd call up my next dealer on my long list of dealers, and he'd say the same thing to me. But these guys didn't know each other. They weren't talking to each other. These are men that I had been dealing with for 10 years, and all of a sudden on the exact same day, they all decided to change their lives. So it seemed like something supernatural was definitely happening. Again, I didn't have any awareness of that then, but now in hindsight, I can see it. And then I was on day 3 of heroin withdrawal, which is just so painful and so brutal. It feels like your skin is made of broken glass and that your bones are on fire and your blood is lava, and it's just so insanely painful. And day 3 is the worst. And I was laying in my bed and I had this moment where I understood what my parents did. If I had ever had any sort of question in my mind, why did my parents kill themselves? In this moment, I understood it. The pain is agonizing. It's so unbelievable. And I thought, I'm going to have to die to make this pain stop. I can't go on like this. And then I heard a voice and it said that I could request what I wanted fixed. And so I said, okay, I don't want to be addicted to opiates anymore. Help me. And they told me to lay back and to count backwards from 10. And as I did, these 2 little men appeared in my mind's eye. And I still see them every time I tell this story. They just are chilling there. They're like, hey, we're still here. So these 2 little men had these lawnmowers that manifested in front of them. And they started to map out every crevice of my mind. And as they did, I felt these intense hot tingles. And I truly believe that they were paving out new neural pathways for me because my receptors in my head were all mixed up, right? I thought that I was in physical pain, but there was actually nothing physically wrong with me. It was just the drugs had flipped the switch inside my neurons to make me think that I was in pain without the drug. So as they're mapping out my mind, I feel all of these tingles, and then when they're done, this bright white flash, and I was instantaneously healed. Out of day 3 of withdrawal, it was incredible. I threw myself on the ground. I was crying out to the divine. How could this be happening? I don't believe in you. I don't believe in this. You could not have picked a more unworthy subject to bestow this kind of grace on. And just to tell you about the contrast again, I was an atheist. I was an orphan to suicide. I was a meth head prostitute strung out on heroin. I was a liar, a manipulator, a thief. I was a rapist. I was a racist. I was a degenerate. I was a derelict. I was all of the things that you would think would condemn you to the exact opposite of what I was experiencing. And there I was, covered in unconditional love and grace from the divine. And, in that moment, my path started to become much more clear. I mean, at first, I thought that I was the second coming of Christ. And I was going out in New York City trying to lay hands on homeless drug addicts. Like, I have the power to heal you. I healed myself. I could heal you too. It was crazy what I was doing. And then through some signs and synchronicities, beautiful signs and synchronicities, I found myself in a long-term rehab. And I ended up spending 17 months in that rehab, learning how to be a person all over again. Not only learning how to be a person who doesn't use drugs to cope with their very real, heavy feelings, but also how to integrate my spiritual experience. I had no idea what happened to me. And I didn't learn what happened to me inside of that facility because I didn't have access to the internet or a cell phone for a year and a half. And so everything that I learned, I just read out of books. And I had a very strong conscious connection to the collective consciousness. So I would channel all day, every day, and they would tell me what was happening to me. And I just believed the writings that I was writing every day. And then they would let me go to the library once a week. And so I would grab every book that I could about the law of attraction, metaphysics, spiritual awakening. I read every sacred text. I just had this insatiable thirst for knowledge. I had never used my mind before. The only vocabulary that I had before my experience was this long laundry list of drugs that I used and how much money it cost to be with me. I didn't have room in my mind for any other thoughts. Centered around getting and using drugs, and that was it. Drugs were my higher power. They were my God. And so now I'm living in an awareness where I have to let go of my best friend, my higher power, my guiding star, drugs, and start to develop a relationship with something else. And so I started to develop my relationship with Source and my angels and my guides. And it was a slow and steady process. I'm still on it. I'm still practicing spiritual discipline every day to remember that I'm divinely guided and I can check in with my guides whenever I want. These are my customer service agents. So it only works if I call them. I can't get any help if I'm not reaching out for support. So I make it a point to reach out every morning before bed, and sometimes I can remember in the middle of the day too.
Was that process easier just after your spiritual experience, where you were more connected, and then after that it's kind of like you have to keep it up? What did that look like?
Yeah, definitely. I was blasted open, all the way open. My crown, my third eye were completely opened all the way. And it was terrifying. Oh my goodness. It was so much to go from zero awareness to 1 million awareness. I asked them, can you turn this down? I don't know how I'm supposed to be a human having a human experience if all of my best friends are invisible. So I asked my guides to manifest into physical people so that I could be with them. And of my soul family started to find their way to me. I found all of my spiritual communities, and they're filled with my guides and my soul family. So it definitely turned down a lot, which I'm grateful for, because I don't know how some people can walk around being psychics and mediums and just always being super connected. I'm here to have a human experience. I'm here to transmute negative energy. And so I stay really grounded in my human experience, and I have tools to do that as well. Like, for instance, my partner is an atheist. So he really grounds me in my human experience, because the rest of my day is spent in elevated conscious conversations. And so I need a human to ground me into the fact that I came here to be human. If I wanted to just stay elevated and connected all the time, I would have never left heaven. But I wanted to have this dual contrasted experience. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's beautiful, because I think sometimes spiritual people or anybody can become religious about whatever they're doing. And their world is that world, and then we lose focus on the world that we were born into. And so Therefore, we're not actually living the life that we were chose to live. And you saw your entire life before this where you had been the complete opposite of what you wanted to be going forward. How did you go about loving yourself and forgiving yourself?
Wow, that's a great question. So I think because of the awareness of the pre-birth planning, I had a much better chance at forgiving myself, because I do have this knowing that it's all orchestrated before I got here. But that doesn't mean that I didn't really feel the feelings of despair in certain relationships. So, my forgiveness process has been slow and steady. It's been a little over 5 years since my experience right now. And I also work the 12 steps in a 12-step program. I belong to Narcotics Anonymous to help me with, areas of my addiction. And one of the steps in Narcotics Anonymous is to make amends. So not only do I make a living amends by assisting people through their healing journeys. So in active addiction, I was a prostitute. But not only would I prostitute myself, I would also manipulate other women. I would get them strung out on drugs, and I would prostitute them as well. Huge, major harm, trauma that I inflicted on other people to get what I needed. I needed money for drugs, and so I was doing this to other people. So in my process of recovery, number one, I make a living amends every day by being of service to other women. So every time that I have an opportunity to connect with another woman, I hold the vision of the women that I harmed in my head, and I feel the energy being repaid. Now, I can't go back and change what I did. So what I do is, moving forward, I act as a better, loving, caring person. And then I also, when I got to that part in my step working process, I did reach out to the women that I harmed, and I made amends, and they forgave me. I couldn't even believe it. I mean, because, there's a part of me that doesn't believe that I deserve forgiveness. I mean, I might understand a bigger picture, but, the person that I am here on earth, I couldn't believe that they forgave me. And I know that that's God in some way, letting me know that I am worthy of forgiveness and that nothing is real. And I don't have to be such a method actor here on earth. I don't have to be so attached to the emotions or the storylines. I can let go. I can easily let go. But, I continue to just be a better person. There's still relationships in my life that I caused so much harm. Like my relationship with my sister is not where I want it to be. And I don't know if it ever will be the way that I think that it should look. But I just continue to be a better person so that she can see that I've actually made real change. I was in active addiction for 20 years. I was this harmful person for well over 20 years of my life. And so today, all I can do is just attempt to be a better person moving forward.
You also say that whenever you were in the afterlife, that you did not want to go back to Earth. You were like, let me stay here. I don't want to go back. Don't force me back. So what did it feel like? Why did you love it so much?
Oh my goodness, that's like the $1 million question, right? It's really hard to put into any sort of human word, but the best word that I can use is home. It felt like home, not like home like where all your stuff is. It felt like some deep-seated soul knowing that that is where I actually come from. I've never been able to duplicate that feeling on earth. I do have moments where I feel heaven on earth, and it's generally moments of connection. Like right now, just being able to share with you, knowing that you're creating this beautiful conscious space for experiencers to come and share their knowledge, that feels like heaven because it feels very spirit-led and full of purpose. And yeah, so I get to have those little feelings of connection when I consciously connect to another person. It's a beautiful feeling. But the feelings of heaven are that of unconditional love, peace, trust, like just this absolute trust. Like I don't have to worry about anything and there's no fear. It's just all acceptance. It's amazing.
That's so beautiful. That it makes me so happy to hear that. And does it make you enjoy your experience here on Earth more, knowing that your soul chose to come here?
It didn't at first. After my spiritual experience, I just kept trying to get back to heaven. That's what I thought I had to do. And I heard the collective telling me, well, you got to do recovery. And so I would, make these milestones in recovery. and I'd cry out to God and I'd say, okay, God, I haven't used drugs in 7 days. Can you come pick me up yet? Sorry, New York City is showing up in a big way. And then, I'd make it to another milestone and I'd say, okay, God, it's been 60 days. I haven't used drugs in 2 months. This is like insane. This has never happened before in my life. Please come and get me. And every time that I cried out, I got no response. And so I thought that I just needed to get back to the spiritual experience. But I realized through my integration process that it's not about going back to heaven. It's about bringing heaven here. And like I shared, I do this when I get to connect with other people. I'm constantly bringing heaven to earth. And that's just all up to my thoughts and my awareness. So for me, I love my human experience now. I didn't when I first came back. I definitely didn't before the experience. But today I make a conscious point to make an affirmation each day. I love my life. I'm grateful for this life. I would even come back to earth if they forced me to. No, if they asked me to. Here it seems like we're going through 80, 90 years of life. But in eternity, it's like, it's 3 seconds. It's nothing.
The way you describe heaven and the fact that you were allowed to go there, even though you were an atheist, you didn't believe in Jesus, you didn't believe in God, any God, that can be very uncomfortable and foundation shattering for people to hear, especially people who grew up hearing a different story. You didn't see golden gates and you didn't believe in Jesus, yet you still got into heaven. So what would you say to someone who that is their belief system, that you wouldn't have been allowed to go to heaven since you didn't believe in God?
Yeah, well, man, I've thought about this a lot. There's nothing that I can say to change a person's belief system. There just isn't. I mean, you can look at before and after pictures of me and you can see that God did something. And that's beautiful. And, my understanding of Jesus as a man on earth was that he hung out with prostitutes and non-believers and sinners. And he was okay with that. And that's kind of the feeling that I got in heaven. I mean, I was with a Christ light for sure. But in my experience, Christ and Buddha and Krishna and all these higher entities were all the same thing. It's just in different cultures, we have different words for it. So I think what I would say to anybody who's maybe they're wrestling with the idea in their Christian faith is just remain open-minded. Maybe everything that we've been taught isn't actually what it is. Maybe there is some room to learn something new. So again, for me, I study and I teach A Course in Miracles, which is this big, beautiful book right here. And this is Jesus's words channeled through the mind of an atheist psychotherapist from Columbia University in the 1970s. When I found this book, I thought, oh yeah, why do I think that Jesus just left me with the mistranslated, jumbled, edited words of the Bible from thousands of years ago? Of course, Jesus loves us enough to come back and tell us more. And so for me, this book, you could tell that it's not a human mind that wrote it. There's no way. It's really dense. It's actually quite hard to understand, but there is a workbook inside of it. And there's a lesson for every day of the year. And that workbook was my integration of reprogramming. I had to learn that my thoughts are not always right. And so this book helps me understand that and reprogram those thought systems. And I'm so grateful for this book. And of course, you have to be open-minded enough to believe in channeling, to believe that it is the word of Jesus. But even if you didn't think that it was Jesus, the workbook itself is such a great tool to start to dismantle thought and belief systems. So if your thought system is working for you, if you feel totally happily content in your faith, then you don't have to worry about anything. For me, living my life led by spiritual principles is how I design my life today. So spiritual principles are honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, acceptance, tolerance, patience. So if your faith is leading you to all of those things, then your life probably feels as good as my life does. But if your faith is leading you to judgment or separation or anything like that, I would say maybe it's time to rethink, because we are all one.
Right. Yeah, okay, thank you so much for that. I think that is going to resonate with people listening. And it also resonates with my past self, because I went through deconstruction of evangelical Christianity. So I would have loved to have heard this then. Yeah. So
Yeah, when I first came back from my experience, I thought that I was supposed to be an evangelical Christian. And I was racked I went through all these different faiths. I went to an evangelical church, I went to a Baptist church. I just wanted to be excited about Jesus. Like, I finally knew who Jesus was, and I really wanted to be excited about him and be around other people who were excited about him. And so I put myself in all these different situations, and I found that it was not aligned with my experience, that I can love Jesus and I don't have to conform to somebody else's idea of Jesus. And so I just started to construct my own spirituality around what I believed. And then I found different texts that helped me with that. And I think that at some point, especially with the Great Awakening, we are all going to get to a point where we start to deconstruct our belief systems and start to build new ones. And it's very brave. It's very courageous to look outside the box when you've been taught one thing your whole life and to say, oh, maybe that thing isn't right. And yeah, I definitely have a lot of empathy for people who are in that space, but just living your life led by spiritual principles is enough. And thank you for letting me share that.
Yeah. And so this Great Awakening, what is that? Can you explain what you mean by the Great Awakening?
Yes. So for me, the download was very loud, clear, concise. The words just radiate in my brain all the time. The Great Awakening is that we are here to assist the collective in awakening from a level of third dimensional thinking to fifth dimensional thinking. And what that means is that we're going from an ego, self-centered thought system to a spirit, service, God-centered thought system. And that can happen all throughout your day. I do believe that the Great Awakening will be this beautiful, great solar flash where everyone will awaken all at the exact same moment, the people who aren't already awoken. And there's those of us that have already begun awakening that are paving the way for those people. The more that we stand in our truth and that we proudly, honestly speak out about these spiritual experiences, we are uplifting the consciousness of the planet because we're imprinting new ideas onto an old system. So, and I'm not always living in a God-centered thought system. I have my very human moments of ego-centered thought. But for me, the majority of my day is spent in service and spirit. And so I know that I'm doing my part for the Great Awakening. And it's an individual journey. It's all about the inner world. My inner world is reflected in my outer world. I see and I'm surrounded by so many people who are awakening, have tapped into their spiritual gifts, who are being of service to the collective. And it feels amazing to be part of communities like that.
Can you describe what third, fourth, and fifth dimensional thinking is like?
Yeah, sure. So third dimensional thinking would be just being self-centered. So, and material based. So thinking, I need to work really hard to make money because I want this new car. That's an ego-centered thought system. Like, how does that serve anybody? You having a nice fancy car? It probably doesn't, unless you're driving to an orphanage to go adopt a bunch of children, or I don't know, right? A fourth dimensional level of thinking is about awareness. So it's about the awareness that there is an ego-centered thought system and that there is a spirit-centered thought system. And so the 4D is about living in awareness. And then again, the 5D is about service, spirit, God-centered thinking. You can use whatever language resonates for you. So a God-centered thought, spirit-centered thought, again, going to be aligned with those beautiful spiritual principles. Am I practicing acceptance and open-mindedness? Am I being of service to somebody else? And being of service doesn't mean that you have to throw a ton of money at somebody or a cause or anything like that. Being of service could just be saying a prayer. That's a fifth dimensional thought system. Saying a prayer for other people, not yourself, right? Not saying, God, please give me this. Please send me my soulmate. Please do this. Please do that. But saying, God, please do your will for the highest good for all. Please, or just saying a prayer, a thought, and then being of service. Being of service could be smiling at a stranger on the street. It could be holding a door open. It could be something really big, like adopting a child. That's something that's of service. So those are the differences. So it's self-centered, awareness, God-centered.
Okay. You explained that really clearly. I got that. One last question. What about let me see how I can word this. Yeah, if our souls plan the experiences that we're going through, do some souls plan to die before they even come to earth through miscarriage?
Absolutely. Yes. And I'm going to reference a great book that can help somebody comprehend this. So there's a book called Your Soul's Gift, and the author is Robert Schwartz. And Robert Schwartz is a regression therapist who regressed tens of thousands of people in between lives into the soul planning process. There's also another great book called Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton. Again, same concept, regression therapist in between lives space. So I'm not just like making this information up. There's actually literature that confirms it. So in Your Soul's Gift, which is Robert Schwartz's second book, he talks about very adverse conditions. Why do souls sign up for miscarriage, abortion, rape, molestation, incest, poverty, mental illness, and suicide? And there's a chapter for each of those inside that book. And the chapter about miscarriage really resonated with me. And, sometimes there are souls that just kind of want to come in and see what that gestation is like. What is it like to be inside of a body? Sometimes souls don't come into the fetus until much later in the pregnancy. The experience could just be that the mother wants to experience some sort of loss. For contrast, again, we come from a state in heaven where there's nothing but love, honesty, and unconditional love. And so when we come to earth, we want to experience the dual experience. Doesn't feel like we do when we're here, but we definitely do want to experience the contrast, because there is no contrast in heaven. It's totally boring. It's only one thing. It's just unconditional love, snooze. So we come here to have these really contrasted experiences. And the loss of a child is definitely the most epic contrasted experience that a soul can sign up for. Those people who experience things like that, those are our greatest spiritual warriors. They are like the high level, they are combat.
So do you think that souls who choose to have these very intense, as you say, contrasted experiences, that here on earth we'd be like, I would never want to go through that? Do you think the souls who choose those type of experiences are very old souls and they've reincarnated many times? Or what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think that it could be a combination of both things. I think that a new soul, not realizing what it's getting itself into, could pick an experience like that, despite the advice of their guides or their team. And, just say like, nah, I'm cool with it. It's not even real. It doesn't matter. And then pick to experience it, and then be here and maybe become suicidal because they didn't understand what they were actually signing up for. Sometimes I think that the pre-birth planning process is a bit of a misinformed decision, and it really just takes until you get through it to understand that you have to really be in a state of spiritual awareness where you're disconnected and you're detached from everything that goes along with the emotions from the experience. And that takes, probably thousands of lifetimes. But I do think that some old souls do sign up for that. And I think that a lot of the times it's because they're balancing energy from other lives. So maybe in a previous life, the people who have those experiences of losing a child, their child is their soulmate. And they've come into life after life. They're members of the same soul family. They've done this over and over again. They've played all these different roles with each other, whether it's husband, wife, child, parent, sibling relationship, or friendship relationship. They keep incarnating over and over again. And so they just want to experience different things. And so they love each other so much because they're these really kindred soulmates that they decide to have this really painful experience together because they couldn't imagine their soulmate having it with anybody else.
Amazing. That's really cool. And you talk about your spirit guides, and you asked them to manifest as humans and be in your life physically. So could anybody ask to do that? How do you talk to your spirit guides?
Everybody has access to their guides and their angels. And again, like I said, they are our customer service agents. It only works if you call them. Some people are always kind of screaming out for a sign. God, show me, have lightning strike. Like, let's not be so dramatic. Okay. It could be something much more subtle than that. So the way that you access your guides is just by being open-minded and being aware. So your guide could come through in so many different ways. You could open up a book to a random page and read a sentence that is exactly the piece of guidance that you need. That's your guide. Your guide could come to you through a lyric in a song and let you know that everything is going to be okay, or whatever question you have for the universe could be answered through the lyric of a song. They come to you through sequences of numbers. So if you are seeing 1111 or 222 on your stove clock very, very often, or checking your phone at those exact moments when it's a sequence of numbers, that's your team letting you know, like, hey, I'm here. I'm just waiting for you to, to hit me up. Like, let me know what's going on. There's so many different ways that they can come through, and they can also come through other people. So, I've had experiences where I've walked past a homeless man on the street and he speaks to me in a riddle, and then a little feather flies past my face, and I'm like, okay, that's a guide for sure. And so my human is like, ew, gross, homeless guy. Like, don't talk to me. Don't come near me, because like I'm judging. My human is always going through a lens of perception and judgment. But my spirit is like, yo, pay attention to everything. Always be aware of what's going on around you, because you never know how we're going to come through. And so when I asked my guides to come through into people, they absolutely did. And so I have these friendships with people. Maybe they don't know that we're each other's soulmates or guides, but I have that awareness, and I keep that awareness. And you could say that I'm living in a fantasy. Doesn't matter. I love my life. My life is led by spirit. I have no fear of anything. And so when I listen to my friends talk to me and I hear experiences, I can see their mission. I see it deeply within them, and I truly pay attention to what they say. And so it makes those relationships so much stronger, because I am living in a state of awareness where I see everybody as a soulmate. Everybody has a message from God. And again, like, there's some people that I really dislike on earth, and I'm like, please don't ever talk to me again. I'm not perfect. But those people are also my soulmates, and they're my greatest spiritual teachers, because they trigger the F out of me, and I can't stand them. And so I know that they are assigned to me for some reason.
Okay. Well, Betty, this has been amazing. I thank you so much for your time. Before we end, could you let us know what you're doing? Do you have a book coming soon? Are you working on anything?
Yes, definitely an aspiring author. That's happening. I also work as a transformation coach. So if you're somebody who's looking to dial into your guides, or you're looking to transmute some sort of trauma in your life, you're dealing with addiction, that's definitely what I specialize in. I take people through shadow work, through transformational journaling, and I have a coaching business. I'm also on all social media. So if you want to reach out and connect, my handle on everything is Buddha Betty. It's a play on words. And I would love to connect. And thank you so much for this space. And thank you for what you're doing. It's so cool to be creating a conscious space for people to express themselves.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.